Welcome to Rise Up in Business, the law podcast for small business owners. This podcast is designed to share important legal information without the stuffy legal jargon. I'm Tracy Milacrane. Let's get into today's episode. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Rise Up in Business podcast. I'm getting really specific again today in this episode, specifically for interior designers. And the reason for that is because I have a lot of interior designers in my community. I have a lot of interior designers as clients, and I'm followed on Instagram by a lot of interior designers who reached out recently when we went out to our audiences to let them know that we were doing some forward planning for this season of the podcast and to invite followers and listeners to share with us what they wanted to hear from us this season. A number of interior designers have reached out and said, can you talk specifically to this business, to this industry, around what we can do to protect ourselves? So in today's episode, I'm going to share with you 6 ways you can protect your interior design business. Protecting interior design business is vital, like it is for any business, but there's so many moving parts in an interior design business. It's dynamic, it's creative, it's constantly changing because the nature and scope of what designers are doing for their clients is different, one client to the next. So like I say always on the podcast, there's no one size fits all. And that really extends to interior designers too, because there's so many intricacies in the way the business is structured, so many intricacies in processes and systems and how each business does things, that this interior design business is going to be very different to the one down the road, and it'll be nuanced from the one down the street. So it's not one size fits all, which is why I've put together these 6 areas that you need to focus on to protect your interior design business. The first point I want to share is this: have very clear, tailored client agreements in place. Now, these can be called your client service agreement, your design agreement, your interior design agreement, whatever you'd like to call it, it doesn't matter. It's whatever is aligned for your business, but it is the agreement that you enter into with your clients. Sometimes these agreements are standalone agreements in that you send it out to the client and they sign it, and that written document is the entire agreement. Other times, and this is becoming more and more common, other times the scope of works or the fee proposal will be issued with tailored terms and conditions. And together, those 2 documents form the agreement with the client. So whichever way you like to go in your business, provided that the terms are clear and the terms are tailored for your specific business, you are on the track to legal protection. Let's get straight to the point. I have lots of clients reach out to me to say, Tracy, I've gotten this client agreement from a membership that I'm a part of, or from my mentor, or from somebody who has a similar business, so I've just used theirs. Can you take a quick look, please, and let me know if this is okay? Yes, I will take a look. I will always take a look and let you know if it's okay. What I'll always do is ask for some time to have a conversation with you to dive in so I can understand some of the key elements that I need to understand about how you operate your business and what you do in your business and how things work, so that I can then review the document that you've shared with me through that lens. And more often than not, the 2 don't align. So more often than not, what's reflected in that agreement that you have gotten from somewhere doesn't align with how you do things in your business. And most of the time I see this around procurement and custom purchases. Everybody does things just that little bit differently to suit the way they operate their business and how they like to serve their clients. So whether it's procurement or custom purchases, whether it's facilitation, dealing with third parties, delivery of products and where they go, and quality assurance checks, whether it's staging the phases of work or providing a lump sum for the nature of the work. There's a lot of moving parts here that vary business to business. Then, of course, we dive into payment terms and when payment's required and how much and what deposit. So all those sorts of things are things that are really important to consider and make sure that your client agreements are tailored and work for the way you do business. When you're diving in to review your client agreements, intellectual property and copyright is something that needs to be looked at carefully, and the basis upon which you grant your client a license to use your copyright and your IP needs to be examined carefully because, again, different businesses tend to do things differently. And that's something that needs to be carefully nuanced to the way you like to operate your business to ensure that you don't run into issues down the track. So clear, tailored client agreements is your absolute number one when we're talking about ways to protect your interior design business. The second point is solid processes and systems. Now, this might seem like a no-brainer, but trust me, it is not. Having your legal documents in place is one thing. Knowing how to use them is another. And there's no point having properly tailored legal documents for your business if you don't know how to use them, or if you don't have your systems and processes set up so that your team, your VA, so that others know how to use them. And by this, I mean making sure we get the sequence right from when you're talking to a new client, from when you're issuing your proposal or your scope of work, emails, when you're issuing your terms or your agreement, onboarding, when the deposit invoice is issued. All of those things are really important elements of getting those really solid systems and processes in place. Then, of course, we need to make sure that the way you're delivering the services is consistent with how it is that you've said you'll deliver them in the agreement. And then having processes in place to issue invoices, ensure payment, follow up if need be, and if worst case happens, cease providing the services until you've been paid. But again, that has to tie in with the client service agreement. The two go hand in hand. Your legals and your processes and systems, they go hand in hand. The two are just as important. The third consideration on protecting your interior design business is trademarking your brand. Trademarking is not for every business. By no means am I suggesting that. But when we get into the creative space, more often than not, trademarking is a conversation worth having with interior designers because the brand and the elements of the business tend to be really important components of the business's identity. Protecting your business name, your logo, any tagline, any unique elements by applying for a registered trademark can be a strategic move when we're protecting your interior design business. A trademark becomes an asset. It then protects those elements later should you be copied, which in the day and age that we're living tends to be happening more and more. And it helps preserve the brand and the reputation that the business is building. Now, trademarking is not for everybody. There's a lot to be said about trademarking, but you can't simply trademark something because you want to. It needs to be trademarkable. So that in itself is a whole other lengthy conversation. And if you are interested in learning more about trademarks, when to think about it, what's capable of being trademarked, what's the process, etc., so that you've got a general understanding of this area of law, have a look at the Legally Empowered Masterclass series available on the website with a specific masterclass solely on trademarks. There's a lot to get through that I just can't share in the space of a minute or two, but that's definitely the place to go if you want to learn more. The next point to cover is insurance. For interior designers, insurance is a must. So it's not, do I need insurance? It's, what insurance do I need? You absolutely need insurance in your interior design business, and at the very least, that will start with public liability insurance and professional indemnity insurance. Should something go wrong, you need to be protected. All I want to say about insurance here is that it's a must, but please don't do your business a disservice by buying insurance online. You don't know what you're covered for. You don't know what the exclusions are. And in my experience, it can be heartbreaking when a business ends up in a situation where they need to call on their insurance cover only to realize that they're not covered for the particular issue that they had, and they didn't know that that was excluded, or they didn't know that the cover didn't extend that far. So my best guidance here is to speak with a broker so that you can make sure that you have the specific insurance you need for your business based on what you're doing in your business. Point number 5 is copyright protection. So this is a big one for interior designers. And what I do want to say here is that there is an upcoming podcast episode focusing on intellectual property and protection. Specifically, I'll spend a lot more time on this topic. But for today's episode, what I'd like to say here is that as an interior designer, your creative work, including your original drawings and designs and plans, they automatically have protection under the Copyright Act. However, making it very clear that you are preserving your copyright and that you're not assigning your copyright in your client agreements and by including notices on your material, on your original work, is really important. So again, your tailored client agreements ought to set out how you're dealing with intellectual property in your original work and what the license term is and the license conditions are that you're granting to your client for a particular project. Then the copyright notice ought to be included on your original work so there can be no confusion that you're maintaining your copyright, you're not assigning it, and that then ideally becomes a deterrent for people doing the wrong thing and for people using your work unauthorized. I've seen too many times in supporting interior designers that there's confusion or misaligned expectations over what the intention was around copyright and what was agreed, or in some cases what wasn't agreed, because this important issue has not been addressed in client service agreements or the design agreement. The client thought they could do one thing with it. The designer had never indicated that was the case, so there was a misaligned set of expectations, which can be costly and stressful and time-consuming to deal with. So we can avoid all of that by clearly outlining on our work and in our client agreements what our position is in relation to the copyright. Like I said a moment ago, I'm going to be delivering an episode soon diving deeper into intellectual property and protection for interior designers. The last point number 6, often it's the one I start with, but it's the least sexy of all of them, so I've left it until last, but that doesn't mean it's not as important as the others, and that is having the right business structure in place. Now, risk mitigation starts with considering your business structure. And from a legal perspective, that starts with the discussion around asset protection and the industry and the work that you do. When I'm talking business structure, the two most common structures that interior designers tend to use are the structure of a sole trader or the structure of a company. Now, that company structure can have a trust set up under it. I'm not going to go into trusts today. It's not relevant for this podcast episode, but a trust structure will still sit within the company structure for the sake of this discussion. So your business structure for an interior designer is most commonly a sole trader or a company. Now, as a sole trader, there's no asset protection there because all the risk sits with you individually. As a company, there is a layer of protection there with certain caveats, which extend to director duties and things like that under the Corporations Act, which there's no need to go into that for today. But in essence, from an asset protection perspective, the company structure has a layer of protection for you because it's the company entering into agreements with clients and it's the company that holds the liability and the exposure. So that's the starting point when you're thinking about, do I have the right structure? Think about what structure you have, what the options are, and then give consideration to how high risk is the work that you're performing? Are you taking on bigger and bigger value clients? Is the work becoming more complicated? Is there more on the line? What is the level of risk in your business? If you're sitting there nodding your head and thinking along and thinking, gosh, yes, that's me. I am taking on higher value clients. The work I'm doing does carry a higher risk. There is more riding on this. But geez, Tracy, I'm a sole trader. Should I be? That is your nudge to reach out and have a conversation because it's worth exploring the options to see what's right for you. I'm not talking about anything to do with tax or accounting on this episode, out of my wheelhouse, not something that I discuss, but there are tax implications and different reasons for different structures, and so it's worth having a discussion with the accountant as well. But for today, we're talking about legally protecting your interior design business. So it's really important to make sure you have the right structure in place to protect you. And we determine that by considering carefully what it is you're doing in your business. So those are the 6 ways you can legally protect your interior design business. So I'm going to recap on those. The first is having clear, tailored client agreements in place. The second is making sure you have solid processes and systems in place. And that's going to dovetail nicely in with your tailored client agreements. The third is trademarking your brand. The fourth is insurance. Number 5 is copyright protection. And there's another episode coming on that soon where we dive in deeper on that topic. And the 6th way you can protect your interior design business is by having the right business structure in place. By taking the time now to set your interior design business up for success, you can minimize the risk, you can safeguard your intellectual property, and you can establish a really solid foundation for long-term success with clients and suppliers within the industry. There is no substitute for preparation. There are no shortcuts here. And like you've heard me say so many times on the podcast, DIY is for Bunnings, not for your legals. Don't sell yourself short by cutting corners with any of these steps. It's just not worth it. You know my history. If you're a long-time listener, you know my history in law, and you know that I have a litigation and dispute background. So you know that part of my ethos in setting up this business is to help business owners set themselves up for success so that they don't end up in a position having to call a litigation and disputes lawyer, end up in a position like the clients were in that I acted for in the first 12 years of my career. Much of what I saw back then can be avoided. And by working through what I've shared with you today, that is how you avoid ending up in a situation that you don't want to be in. I hope you have found this helpful. If you've decided that after listening to this, it's time to reach out and have a conversation to see whether or not we're a good fit and to see whether we could work together to support your business, then please reach out. Reach out via the website, tmsolicitor.com.au. Send me an email, send me a DM. I'm always happy to hear from you. I love answering questions, and I'd be delighted to chat to see what it is that we can do together to help protect your business moving forward. Thanks so much for listening. I'll catch you next week.